I guess the easy way to put it is my background is I am a Western Sydney boy. I was born and raised in Western Sydney. I'm still living in Western Sydney at the moment. Came from a very working class background. My mum and dad both sort of did it tough getting started. My dad's a migrant from Iran who came to Australia with $10 in his pocket, and my mother, her family are all sort of working class background as well. My grandfather, my mother's father, was a metal worker, and my mother, obviously, her sisters, they went on and they found similar lines of work. Obviously, my mother was a childcare worker, still is, but also worked in various sort of retail sort of jobs. And my aunt is a hairdresser, so very working class background. And then I made the leap as the sort of second person in my family to go to university, first one to go and become a lawyer. So I decided I would go to law school, become a solicitor, and then potentially a barrister later on, once I've got a few more grey hairs. And the idea is essentially I wanted to fight for justice, and I also wanted to start breaking down some of those barriers which exist. And effectively, although I'm at the very start of my career, as you mentioned, I took a dive not only politically recently, but also at the very start of my career. I was working in the beginning of 2020 as a tipstaff to a judge. And after I left that job, working in the courts, I subsequently was put in a position where I had to get a graduate job. The market blew up, obviously, in 2020. No one had jobs for graduates. It didn't really matter what profession you were in. And then, I started witnessing, not only was there this great economic decline, but, we had people being brutalized and people being attacked and coerced left, right, and center. And it progressively got worse throughout the pandemic. And I remember I'd spoken to a friend, or a few friends actually, who were asking me about the constitutionality of all of these things and the legality of all of these measures. And I made a very clear point that if the opportunity was given to me, as a junior solicitor, I would fight for freedom and I would stand up to the government on these people's behalf. And sure enough, at the beginning of 2021, that's what happened. I was given the opportunity by a small law firm to get involved with Rebel News's Fight the Fines campaign. And I jumped, headfirst into that. So I've been fighting for, over the past year, the rights of particularly people that have been given COVID fines, but also a smattering of other people, such as people that have gotten excessive quarantine bills, or people that have been stuck in administrative detention. And it's not just in New South Wales where I'm based, it's also been around Australia. So I've had clients in WA, the Northern Territory, South Australia, none in Tasmania. That's the only one I think I've missed. But basically all around Australia, I've helped people. I joined the LDP, as you mentioned, last year. I was not planning to become political. I'm not really a big fan of the way politics is done. I was planning on obviously pursuing my legal career alone. But during this process and this awakening that things are getting progressively worse, particularly in 2021, decided that I had to make my voice heard politically as well and lend my hand to the party that was standing for freedom. So I decided the LDP is the right one for me. It's a libertarian party. It's a party that's been against lockdowns and COVID coercion from the beginning. And on that basis, I said, okay, well, these guys might have room for someone like me. And just so happened that they invited me to stand at the next federal election in the seat of McMahon and run against Chris Bowen of the Labor Party, who's the incumbent in that seat. And I told them, obviously, I would do that very happily, and I would do my best to pursue the cause of freedom in Western Sydney as well for the party. So that's really where we're at the moment. The other anecdotal stuff is, I'm married. I'm nominally a Zoroastrian, and as I said, my father's a migrant from Iran, so I'm half Persian. I have a 3-legged dog. So lots of little tidbits there that you can probably guess make me a little bit more unique than your average candidate.
Uh-huh. What's the dog's name?
Dog's name is Pluto.
Pluto. What type of
Yeah.
what type
Three-legged Jack Russell.
Jack Russell? Oh,
Yep. Yep.
unique.
Yep.
Okay, well, having said that, what is your assessment of the political and social landscape of Australia at the moment?
It's an interesting sort of time now for us because, at the moment, I feel like we have a much larger proportion of people who are not necessarily just interested in voting for greater freedom and for representatives that are pushing those interests, but also a greater proportion of people that are disillusioned with the two major parties, as well as the alternative on the left, which is the Greens. All of those parties presided over essentially one of the worst economic and social catastrophes in Australian history during the last 2 years, and very callously put the human rights of everyday Australians into the rubbish for that period of time in order to pursue their policy agenda. And there's going to be, I think, a large backlash to that at the polls. But with that said, I think that the long-term effects are going to be not necessarily, that UAP or the Liberal Democrats will win the next election or something crazy like that, but more so you're going to start to see as these parties gain more and more traction at the next election and the following state election, there will be a greater shift away from the major parties in the minds of everyday Australians. And Australians will start to hopefully accept, and I think they will start to accept, that these minor parties should not be viewed as just minor parties, that they should be viewed as serious alternatives. Now, I've been very strong in making clear, in order for the people to actually accept that the Liberal Democrats or UAP or something like that are serious alternatives, and I'm not just saying them, it could be the Reason Party, it could be the New Liberals, one of those smaller parties that's getting more traction. In order for that to be accepted by the public as an alternative, these parties need to take themselves serious as well, which means that we have to be very clear on our message and our principles. We need to be very, very consistent with our candidates. And most of all, we need to move away from, or stay away from, in some cases, political ideas and political positions which would start to move us into the waters of more crazy sort of thinking. We want to be accepted as mainstream parties. So you're not appealing to fringe groups. You're appealing to essentially the body politic of Australia, the main sort of body of citizens, everyday people with your policies. And I think if that happens, there's going to be at least one or two parties on the centre to centre right, as the media would describe it, who will gain more traction. And I think you'll find that they probably fit into the space on the right that the Greens would occupy on the left. And I'm not sure at the moment whether that's going to be the LDP, though I hope it. It could very well be that something like UAP takes that position. It could very well be the case that the New Liberals or the Reason Party takes a similar position somewhere around the centre. But I'm very much of the view that the landscape at the moment is in transition. You're going to start to see more fracturing of the major parties, more splintering of the major parties. And you'll see very, very strong personalities, such as John Ruddick from the Liberals has now moved over to the Liberal Democrats, and he's a leading figure in our party. And you'll start to see more of those prominent Liberals or prominent Labor figures going where their views are better represented and taking a whole bunch of the base with them.